heard the phrases commodities and gambades and all that. Well, those are godmothers and godfathers. Very, very important, because in those days, and even today, it has the same meaning, but not the same strength. If you were considered a godfather, it was an honor.
Welcome to this edition of Stories from the Hollow, which we have entitled The Early Italian-American Experience in Dalton. I'm Bill Guest, and my co-host is Jeff Cornell, president of the Dalton Historical Society, and a gentleman who has had a distinguished career in the profession of education. Our guest for this episode of Stories from the Hollow is Mr. Joseph Ciocci, a lifelong resident of Dalton and the author of The DeRiggi Family Story, a fascinating and charming biography of his family, and poignant portrait of early Italian-American immigrant life and culture in northeastern Pennsylvania. Joe is a graduate of Keystone College and the University of Scranton, earning his MBA from the latter. For many years, he worked in sales management, and as a member of the executive staff of Oak Inc., a company that he and his partner Jay Oken bought and ran for 22 years. Joe has taught marketing as an adjunct professor at Lackawanna College and in the Penn State system. Joe, Jeff Cornell and I are pleased and proud to have you with us today. And before Jeff and I begin with our questions, please give us an introduction by explaining the significance of a document that appears in your book, The DeRiggi Family Story, highlighted as the American Immigrant Wall of Honor certification.
Well, first of all, Bill, thank you for having me here. I really appreciate the opportunity. And I felt it was important to write a book about the family because over all these years, obviously, the family has grown. So a lot of people, young people in the family, more than likely would not realize how all of the family happened to come to northeastern Pennsylvania, settle in Dalton, Pennsylvania, which was a rural area. They came originally from Scranton, because that's where their people were. And my grandfather and my grandmother immigrated to this country from Naples. And that was in the early 1900s. And they were also married in 1913 in Scranton, Pennsylvania. About 1918, they decided to move to Dalton because of the fact that my mother, who was 3 years old at the time, was of a sickly nature. And so the doctors in those days would suggest going to the country because of the air, etc. And so that's what they did, and they lived on South Turnpike Road. But about 1923, to the best of my knowledge, my grandfather and his friend, Mr. Altieri, bought a piece of land in Dalton, about 57 acres. And what they did is they split it and they farmed it. My grandfather was a vegetable farmer, and he made his living by literally growing produce. And then taking that produce down to the wholesale market in Scranton, also clientele, a lot of his relatives and so forth that lived in West Side Scranton, as well as a lot of the local people in Dalton. And in those days, I think very fortunately for them, there were a lot of people that owned estates, and they would come to the old farm literally to go there where my grandmother would pick the goods right in the fields, and they knew they were going to have fresh food. And so that was the whole thing and how it all started.
Joe, let me interrupt you just for 1 second. What, though, was the significance of that certification. Is that when they came into the country?
Well, yes, but you know what? That really was something that pretty much everybody got in 1976, because that was, the birthday of the United States, 200, and so that was something that you solicited, and they would give that to you, knowing that these people actually were real. They came to this country.
Did they get some pride from having that?
Well, of course. But see, the thing was, by the time that happened, my grandparents were already gone,
Okay.
So, but the people, their sons and the daughters, myself in particular, who was a grandchild, we all really did appreciate the fact that that was a certification that they actually did come to this country looking for a better life.
So you had that sense of pride.
Of course.
And Lee Iacocca.
Yes.
Very famous president of what? The Ford Motor Company, I think? He signed it.
He was right. That's right. Because at that time, I think he was the chairman of that particular organization, whatever it was, that were giving those certificates out. Yes, and of course he was a very proud Italian American who made it very good in this country. Not only for Ford but also for Chrysler. And if you go back into those years.
Yeah, that's good. This is Jeff Cornell, and I'm the co-host with Bill, and I'm also, I'll guess, pretty close to 75 years friend of Joe Ciocci's. So I'm here to just listen to the story once again, and I'm learning new stuff every time. And this is a wonderful story, and Joe tells it well. So I'm going to endorse his storytelling to us today about his experience in Dalton. Bill, did you have another question?
In your book, there's an interesting section that reads, quote, "It seems a lot of the time there existed little neighborly love, with disagreements and points of contention creating rifts between the families." Can you expand on that?
Well, I think it's true no matter what partnership you're in. You're not always going to agree on things. And I think that there was points of contention in that regard. I don't think it was anything serious where, it came to blows or anything like that. But I think that a lot of times what happens is that you might have a disagreement over, this piece of land versus yours, or what you're doing and so forth. But and then they all originally lived in one big house. But then at a certain point, the Altieri's built another house, all right? And their children, there was, I think, two.
Now, the Altieri's were neighbors?
Yes, and they were the ones with whom my grandparents bought the land, you see. And so the thing is that when they built their new house, then, and I know of two of their children who did live in the one half of the house that was shared with the Dirigis, my family. So I don't think there was any great points of contention. It was just that I think there were disagreements at times that might have led to some ill feelings. But other than that, I don't think that was much.
What was the interior like of a home where somebody coming into the country would settle for a while?
Well, let me tell you, it was pretty bare. Based on what I understand, and I got a lot of my information, obviously, from the people who lived there. In particular, there was my uncle Len Dirigi, who I can't imagine how many hours I spent with him talking over many years of different things, and also his sisters, as well as my mother. But it was a very bare place. I mean, they had furniture, but it was stark. There was nothing fancy about this place. It was basically just plain stuff. Like, for example, they eventually had 12 children. The first one died at 6 months. Okay, so I think that was another reason why they moved to the country after my mother became sickly. But they had a table that was big enough to sit 14 people, just made out of wood with benches. So it wasn't anything that all they could afford is what they did. There was no running water. There was running water, but with a pump in the house. There were no indoor bath facilities. It was the outhouses. So it was a simple thing. Initially, there was just, for lighting, it was gas or
You said
kerosene.
in your book, you said there was a hole in the ceiling.
Yes.
Something about sharing bath water.
All
I
right.
guess pots for...
Yeah, well, right. At chamber pots, when you at night when you decided that you had to go use a facility, that's what it was.
No interior plumbing.
No
correct?
interior plumbing. That's correct.
So you could miss the people, but can you really miss the old days from that standpoint?
I don't know if I could have done it, but that they did. And the thing was that they were very resourceful. Okay, they did have heat. That they used coal and wood. There was a hole for the heat to go up to the second story. Okay. The water, like I said, they had a hand pump, and so as regarding the bedrooms, they were all shared because as the family grew, not everybody had their own room. They had maybe 3 to a room, the boys and the girls, because as it ended up, they had 7 girls and 5 boys. That was what the family had consisted of.
Were they used to living in close quarters, that kind of proximity, before they came to the United States, or was it something they had to do when they came
Well,
here?
I'm going to say that, yeah, they were used to it because if you came from Italy in those days and they were of peasant stock, okay, they did not have any luxuries. So they were already used to this type of thing. So it wasn't anything new. But what they did is they used their resources in the best way that they could. That's the best way I could explain it.
Let me ask a question, Joe. Maybe it'd be interesting if you told our listeners about the decision or series of decisions that caused them to go into the farming business and how they ended up being such good farmers, and they were good farmers.
Right. I think that how this all happened, when my grandfather did not own the farm, he was working odd jobs as best he could, labor in the Scranton area and so forth. And when he moved to Dalton, before he bought the farm, he probably continued to do the same thing. But when they came from Italy, they were already adapted to farming because in those places where you grew your own vegetables, essentially, especially all the things that you relate to with Italian cooking, like tomatoes and all the herbs and all that type of thing. They were already used to this. As far as other foods like bread, they made their own bread. They killed their own stock for let's say pigs or calves and so forth for meat. So they were already used to doing this type of thing. Just to, again, as I keep saying, they took total use of any resources or any abilities that they had. And so when they went and got involved with farming, it wasn't, something they say, oh, I have to learn. They already knew what to do. So pretty much it was a matter of building the clientele and getting a reputation that you were a good a person to deal with.
And they delivered food to the wholesale block in Scranton,
yes.
Correct?
The wholesale block was a place that my grandfather would go. And in the beginning, they would do this by wagons pulled by horses. So there again, you're talking maybe about a 12-mile situation where it took time, obviously, to pack the thing up, take it down to there. And then also they had a route which went through Scranton, West Side, and other parts, as well as through the Abingtons. So they had customers. And then, of course, like I said, there were customers that came to the farm, where my grandmother would actually go out into the field, pick the vegetables with their customers right there by their side. So they knew what they were getting.
And the fact that they were farmers.
Yes.
The fact that they were able to make a living doing that included the fact that they came into contact with very affluential families in the area, like the Woolworths, for example.
Absolutely, right? Absolutely. And that was a plus because of the fact that Dalton in those days had a lot of families of wealth. And some of the families that, I could mention, the Fullers, the Sweeneys, the Woolworths, as you mentioned, Scrantons, the Chamberlains, the Germans, the Beelans, these were all local wealthy families. And they would come and, buy produce.
In your book, there's another interesting paragraph. Well, there are lots of interesting paragraphs in your book, but this one I noted, quote, "You have to realize the people of whom we are talking, immigrants and American-born children of immigrants, were considered low-class citizens," unquote. Can you explain that?
Well, yes, because they were on the lower end of things. If I was to describe, low end, middle class, upper class, you would have had to consider them lower class. Okay. Now, that's where they started. But as they assimilated, and this is a major word, is assimilation, into the community, then they became better off, okay? But they had to earn it. See, that's the difference, I think, a lot of times where you talk about these things. It's a matter of earning your respect from the community and going up to the up, in that regard. So they did improve in that regard. And the children, of course, they went to the local schools. And so then they became assimilated into the community. And then they went on and they were able to earn money on their own and so forth and became successful in their own right.
You mentioned assimilation. You must be reading my mind because that was my next question. Did they have trouble assimilating? Because you noted in the book they were poor. The Ku Klux Klan was in the area, the Dalton area, for a while in their years here. How difficult, let me put it that way, how difficult was the assimilation process for them?
Well, I think that in the beginning, it was a more difficult situation, okay? But as I just said, they earned the respect of the people in the area. And I think that's how it became easier for them. And you're correct. There was prejudice, and I can honestly say, in my own right, my case and in my family, I never really saw, quote, prejudice, okay? However, there was a local KKK, something that my father talked about where they actually did burn the cross. And this is going back to like the 20s and the 30s and so forth. And they actually did, say, hey, we're here, okay? But there was nothing of any significance that affected, I don't believe, our family, okay?
So the KKK wasn't targeting your family? No.
I think it was just their way of saying what they believed, which obviously was there was a bias there. But for all intents and purposes, Dalton, Pennsylvania, was a place that was very accepting of people. Okay, I can honestly say that. In those days, and even where Jeff and I grew up, we had our doctor, the general practitioner. We had our own drugstore, the little candy store, the little food store, and all this type of thing. And everybody knew everybody. That was the whole key. And so there was no sense of prejudice in that regard.
And Jeff has a question for you,
Sure.
too, but on this subject, just let me note this. You mentioned in the book they assimilated so well,
Yes.
and became so highly respected
Yes.
in Dalton that you had a relative named Neil who required brain surgery.
That's correct.
And somebody paid for it, but they weren't sure.
Anonymous, yes,
Right?
yes. That was my Uncle Neil, and I don't know, it was probably in his middle 20s or so when they discovered, and the local doctor actually, M.A. Klein, actually discovered this by looking through his eyes, the way I understand, that he had a brain tumor. Well, in those days, that was like an unheard of thing because nobody really knew that much about how to even operate on something of this nature. So he became actually an experimental type of situation at Temple University, where he was written up in the books. He had 2 operations. The second one, they realized that he was gone, that they couldn't save him. So they literally, the cancer had gone down his spine. So it was at a point where they said, there is of no use. But who paid for it?
Right.
And the word was, my mother thought it was the Woolworths, okay, who were right up the street from where the farm was. My uncle Len DeRiggi says it was Mott Peck. Now,
Who was a lawyer in the
He
area.
was a lawyer in the area, right. And he was a guy that was instrumental in different things that the family did, okay? And even in my own personal family, my father and mother, he also was instrumental. So I don't know for sure, but that's what we understand.
Jeff, I'm sorry that
No, that's good. Again, Joe and I are baby boomers.
Right.
Our story begins when the guns were cooling at the end of World War II. But I can address this from my perspective, and that is the phrase, the proof is in the pudding. Everybody knew if you wanted good produce or fresh vegetables, the DeRiggi, Ciocci clan was the place to go. And they were people of their word. If they said they were going to do something, they did that
Yes.
thing. So I think that there was no need for outside certification or an organic farm or anything else. Everybody that knew the DeRiggis and the Ciocis saw them to be true and honest business people selling a good product.
Absolutely, and I thank you for that because it's true. Yes.
What brought them here to the United States in the first place?
Well, right off the bat, your opportunities were here. Okay, you could never become an owner where they were in Italy as peasants, as I've called them, and I'm proud of the fact that I'm from peasant stock.
There wasn't that kind of mobility?
There was not the mobility in the small towns, no. So they saw the opportunity, just like so many other immigrants. Didn't make any difference whether you were Italian, Polish, German. If you were in that end of things, you came to this country because this is where the opportunities were. And so they came to this country with their commodities and gambades and their families because of that. And they knew that they were going to do better here than they ever would in the old country.
Did they have relatives here to come to?
Yes, I think that was part of the reason why they came to this area. It was the same with my father. My father came to Dalton, Pennsylvania, because his father was here.
Oh.
And he had been working for the Fullers. So when my father came here at 18 years old, he worked for the Fullers. And but it was the same way with the DeRiggis. They came here because this is where their people were. And they knew that they had at least something, people that they could communicate with, had opportunities with them. They would lead them in the right direction and so forth. Because in those days, everybody depended on who they knew, their friends and so forth. There was nothing given to anybody. See, I used the other word before. They earned things. They had to adapt. They had to learn the language. And it didn't make, the difference whether you were an Italian, a Polish, a German. If you didn't speak English, you had to learn it. There was nobody there saying, oh, let's teach you this.
Did they speak English?
They learned broken English because they had to out of necessity. Okay. So yes, they learned enough English so they could get by and so forth. Now, obviously the children were different. Bill, I think in when I first talked with you, I told you that my mother was the oldest, the second child, okay? But so when the first one died at 6 months, she was the oldest in the family. At 8 years old, she was still speaking only in Italian. So the principal from the school, local school, comes and says, to the Dirigis, you have to put this child in school. So the bottom line was that's what they did. And that's where she actually learned how to speak English.
Now, the Dirigis that's your mom's maiden name.
That's correct. That's her maiden name. That's correct. And so she learned how to speak English from first grade, went through 8 grades, because after 8 grades, she had to leave to help provide for the family. So she went to work. But up through 8 years, she never flunked a grade. She spoke with no accent. It was an unbelievable situation, and something that I never knew until later on in life. But that it being true, it was really a fascinating thing that she could do this, achieve what she had to do to get through 8 grades and have no accent and learn English. And she learned it by the fact that there were other people, the teachers and the students were willing to help her. And that was, again, a good example of Dalton.
How did they manage to get through the Depression?
Well, as a matter of fact, I say this in the book. The Depression, I don't think it really affected them that much because they were already at a lower level. So they were already producing their own food. They were producing their bread. They were, as far as meats, they would do their own butchering. For all intents and purposes, they were literally taking care of themselves. Now, people had to eat. So they still had a business where they were providing food. So I think that was really part of the whole situation. They had a product that everybody needed, number one. And number two is regarding taking care of themselves. They were already used to it.
I just was wondering, is there a specific reason for Dalton? Was there something that called about Dalton, or what was the story of how they selected that as opposed to another rural area?
You know what, Jeff, I don't know for sure. Okay. Other than there must have been something that drew them here. Maybe it was an ad that there was a farm for sale, because the farm, the way I understand, was owned by an old Polish family. Okay, in Dalton. I don't know if I'm pronouncing their name correctly. My mother would say they were called the Sherpas. I don't know for sure. But the thing was that I think the land was available, and they took advantage of buying it. And now, here's a question that I asked myself, and nobody knew the answer to this either. And that is, where did the money come from? Okay? Because in those days, if you were at that level, I doubt if banks were going to back you up with their money. So I think that also had to do with friends. I think more than likely they borrowed funds from friends and then ultimately would pay it back, because that's the way a lot of things were done in those days. They depended on each other. And you know, I don't see it any other way that it could have happened.
Which leads into my next question. How close were Italian immigrant families in Dalton and in nearby communities at that time when they came here? And did they try to maintain close relationships because of cultural and origin similarities?
Oh, absolutely. In Dalton at the time, I'm going to say there might have been 7, maybe 8 families. Okay. So all of these people knew each other. Okay. And of course, there were ones in Waverly and other parts of the Abingtons. All right. So they did keep in close contact. And as a matter of fact, they would buy the produce too, okay, from the farm. And then there would always be something reciprocal. Okay, and then a lot of times there would be card games. They would get together on weekends because they worked all week, but Sunday was the day of rest. So Saturday night, that you might have friends getting together for card games in the local area. Okay, having a few drinks with each other and so forth. Playing cards, enjoying things of this nature.
Well, I would say that the two names come to mind because I'm from Dalton too: the Palaskas and the Catalanos.
Yeah,
I know you have a connection with the Catalanos somehow.
We're out. The Catalanos were also from Scranton, and yes, there was a Catalano that lived in Dalton as well as the Palaskas. Now, ironically enough, that Catalano is no relation to the Catalano that is.
I have to interject here. Joe's given me a wonderful phrase that I've used throughout my life and taught to many people all over the place. And he would say, that person's not my cousin. Now, you never get people that say that, but from the negative point of view. And so I started using it when I moved back to Dalton.
Yeah.
I would say to somebody, well, she's not my cousin.
Yeah.
But Joe's answer would be, well, she's married to my cousin.
They were big cousin-in-laws. So my Uncle Phil Catalano married my Aunt Mary DeRiggi. And that's how the Catalano became part of the DeRiggi clan. And to the best of my knowledge, there was no relationship between that Catalano and the other famous Catalano on West Side who has the food store and so forth. But they all knew each other because my grandparents knew those Catalanos because they all were in Scranton. And West Side was a particular place in Scranton where there were a lot of Italian families. And that's how they knew each other. But in the Dalton area, there were the Altieri's, there was the Airy family, there was the Massaferis.
And the Palombos, right?
There was Palumbo, there was Colombo, okay? Colombo became a big name here because of Frank Colombo, who had the construct the interstate and so forth.
They make the cement barriers.
Right, the cement barriers and so forth. But they were these were all friends. And as a matter of fact, the Colombos lived right up from where the DeRiggis lived. And but their son Frank became big with interstate and all types of other things. So yes, and there was just a lot of camaraderie, I guess is the word that you could use. Again, I just keep going back on the thing that they depended on each other. Now, that doesn't mean they weren't friends with other people. They were friends with everybody, okay? Because I think in those days, it was better to be a friend than not to be. So the thing is that they were friends with a lot of different types of people. But in particular, there was, and then, of course, you probably heard the phrases commodities and gambadis and all that. Well, those are godmothers and godfathers. Very, very important because in those days, And even today, it has the same meaning, but not the same strength. If you were considered a godfather, it was an honor
In the community or the family?
No, to be a godfather for somebody, because that meant that if in fact that person's parents died, you were the one that you became the father, you became the mother, literally took on the right and to raise that kid. So, and I think that it was important because you never knew in those days, life wasn't maybe as long as it is today, how long people live. So, godmother, godfather was very important, and it was an honor.
Let me go back just a moment to when they first came here.
Yeah.
And you said one of the reasons they came was to have greater social mobility, but also greater opportunity.
That's correct.
Were they thinking of themselves, or were they thinking of what they could do for future generations of the family?
I think both, because they knew that by staying in the old country, their kids were never going to have maybe the opportunities that America offered them. And now that is true even today. Okay, if you are a citizen of the United States, you have nobody in this country says, I'm going to give you something for nothing. You got to earn it. But you got the opportunity. That's the whole key here. The opportunity, the freedom to do that. Now you got to realize that from about 1923, Mussolini started coming into power. And this is one of the reasons why my father came at 18. Because he was going to be drafted into, Mussolini's
That's
army.
interesting, Joe. So your dad came because of Benito Mussolini coming to power in Italy.
Well, yeah, because my grandfather was already here. All right. So you had to be sponsored to come in. So my grandfather, I assume, was the one that sponsored my father to come. But my father knew that there was, and my grandfather, because he came to this country making money, then he would go back to Italy, back and forth for about maybe 3 times, whatever, and he would earn money that was worth a lot more. American money was worth a lot more in Italy. So when my father came here, he came here knowing that there was more opportunity for him. Now, my grandfather and grandmother, they already owned property in Italy. Okay, so my father did not come from a lower end thing. They actually owned property. I actually visited that in 1970. I don't know what else I could say other than the fact that even though they had property. And they had groves, like they had olive tree groves in Chester. But it wasn't that they were wealthy, but they did own land. My father still saw the opportunity to come to this country. And my father never returned back, and he became a citizen of the United States.
Tell me what your dad did then. Your father joined the U.S. Army.
Oh yeah. He was in he was 33 years old when World War II came about, and obviously, he was in the service, and he served 37 months in the Pacific, and but he had become a citizen of the United States as opposed to his father. His father did not. Okay, he had worked here, on a visa or whatever it was, and he would go back and forth. But my father did not return. He only returned for vacations, but he actually became a citizen. And then he became, he became a soldier in the United States Army. Yes.
And some of them, you pointed out, would travel back to Italy, I guess, to financially assist relatives who were still there.
Exactly.
Was that pretty standard, would you say?
Well, I don't know if you could say it was standard, but it did happen. My grandfather, my father's father, who I never knew, because he was already had died by the time I was born, he would come over here to earn money. And again, this is all through what my father used to talk to me about. He would stay here for, say, 5 years, and then he would go back to Italy. Well, American money was worth a lot more than Italian money. So he would go there, and that's how they got land and different things of this nature. And so he did that, I think, probably in the neighborhood of about maybe 3 times. And so he was over here already in the early 1900s. My father came here in 1927 at 18 years old. And he automatically went to work for the Fullers, because that's where my grandfather was already working. At those days, the people who were wealthy, for example, the Fullers, and I can only speak about them in particular, there were 9 people that just served in the house. My grandfather was one that was in the house. My father came and was outside. Now, my father had already known how to be a gardener, but when he came here, that's what he did. He worked with gardening. How did he learn English, for example? He worked with people, 2 friends in particular, one named Anthony, another one named Burkhauser, 2 good friends. He learned English from them. He would go to the movies. The talkies came in 1928. He would go to the movies and learn English there. So he was a young man, so he could absorb a lot of this stuff.
How important, Joe, was it for each generation of the family, right from the first ones who came to the United States, how important was it to try to teach the culture, inform the new generations of the culture of the old country?
Well, I think that it was important for them to know what their roots were.
Yes.
Okay? So I always have said this, be very proud of who you are. It doesn't make any difference where you start, but that's who you are. That's what your makeup is. And so it was important because that's how you also pass that type of thing on through music. In particular, okay, in the Italian families, music, like I think in so many of the immigrant families, music was important, okay? You had your own style of music. My grandmother used to sing.
From the old country?
From the old country, right. My grandfather used to listen to opera, okay, because that was a very Italian thing. So that was important. And like if you were Polish, okay, you played polkas. Okay, but that wasn't the only music that the Polish played. They had some wonderful composers. It's the same with the Germans. They had their own type of polka. The Czechs had their type of polka and so forth. And then, as a matter of fact, and I can only just throw this in, the instrument that I studied and studied music for 9 years was the accordion.
You played the accordion?
Oh, yes. From 9 years old through 17, I literally had somebody coming to the house teaching me music. And to the point where I actually had considered becoming a professional. But the thing was that was an important thing. And the reason why is my father loved music. He couldn't play it himself, but he loved music. So he was playing that accordion through me. You know?
How did you learn to play it?
Oh, I was taught.
You took lessons?
Oh, absolutely. For 9 years. I had, as a matter of fact, a man named Ralph Cognetti. Now, I know Cognetti is a name that people might recognize in this area now because of Paige. Well, she's married to a Cognetti. Well, that Cognetti was a nephew to the man who taught me, okay? So this goes back a generation, but that's the point. But anyway, he would come to the house. He taught a lot of people, and he was a very good, and then his son became my teacher, and he went to Wilkes, got a degree in music, and the point was that he also became a professional. Now, not only that, that's where again families become close. That his son Frank became my sponsor for confirmation in the Catholic Church, okay? So because of the music, because of the fact that Cognetti we became that close. So this is the way it happens.
I don't want to get everybody hungry, but can you describe a typical early Italian-American meal?
Well, first of all, and I can only say this from my own experience, okay? Not necessarily, my grandmother was a wonderful cook, but all her daughters were wonderful cooks too. And my mother in particular was a wonderful cook. Well, I'm going to give you a holiday meal. You know, when they talk about a 7-course meal, and growing up, I never realized this until I got out into the real world, because I got to let you know that when you grow up in these types of households, it's like a nest, okay? You got all these aunts and uncles. In my case, that's the way it was. And so you were always like, you knew all about the family and all, but there were a lot of things that went out that were happening in what I would call the other world. You know, when you get 18 and you go out into the real world, that I thought everybody ate this way, but they didn't. So anyway, you would start on a holiday meal. Let's say a Christmas. We would start with soup. And my mother made a wonderful soup that you can also get in the better restaurants called stracciatelle. And this soup was made like with egg and whatever, various ingredients. And then after that, you would have pasta, okay? And then you would also have the sauce meats, like it could be pork, meatballs, beef, that was made in sauce. And then after that, you would have almost like another meal. You would have a roast, for example, chicken, or it could be beef or whatever, with maybe 3 vegetables. Then, after you finished whatever course that was, you would go into the next one, which would be dessert. And dessert could be anything from a fancy Italian whatever to a pie or a cake, because here again, all the cakes and pies were made from scratch, okay? When that took place, you would have also coffee, and it was typically served in demitasse cups, what they call demitasse, and it was espresso coffee. And you would have anisette, or if you wanted to get it more expensive, you could have sambuca, and you would put that shot in the coffee, okay? After that, you would have fruit, various fruits. We always ate fruit.
Grown locally?
No, just bought in the store.
Okay.
Now, yes, if you had fruit, like my father, when he was producing gardens for us, we had cantaloupe, watermelon. There was a lot of things. So yes, plums. But after that, you would have things like chestnuts. So a typical meal that might start at 12 o'clock ended at 4.
Wow.
So that was a typical holiday. And you would always have other relatives as part of it. There was never a time where we ate just by ourselves at a holiday. Okay. But even a typical Sunday meal, just for my family or the way we grew up, we always had a Sunday meal, always was with pasta with the sauce meat. And then after that, you had another meal. So one day I'm talking to a person that I'm working for in one of the companies that I worked for early in my life. And he said, well, for crying out loud, he said, you're eating 2 meals. To me, I didn't know that. I was eating a pasta meal with whatever and salad. Of course, you always had salad. And then we ate the roast. And he said, well, that's like 2 meals. I said, well, I never realized that. I thought that's where everybody ate. And as a matter of fact, that's another thing that you might be interested in knowing. When you go out to eat today, you always have the salad first. We never did. It was always at the end.
Oh, really?
Oh, yes. You would eat the meal and then have salad at the end.
Before dessert or?
Oh, yeah, before dessert. Because it was considered something to clean you out, if you know what I mean.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Jeff, I have a question for you.
Oh.
Oh, you go ahead first.
Well, while we're talking about food now, I got to come into this conversation saying that Joe and I met in not in first grade. In
That's
Dalton.
what I was going to ask you.
Okay. Well, so typically, we're going to school. Now, there was eventually a cafeteria in Dalton School, and we were terrified of the woman who ran it. So you would frequently bring your lunch. Now, my lunch would be a fried bologna sandwich on Wonder Bread. And I would then see Joe over there. Joe's lunches, Joe's sandwiches were a symphony. He'd open up whatever, it was in wax paper because there weren't any bags, any kind of plastic bags. And he's got good, thick, wonderful Italian bread and all kinds of cold meats, capicola and wonderful Italian cheeses. And I'm there with maybe my pimento cheese on Wonder Bread, thinking, coveting what he had for his lunch. So that's my remembrance of Joe's family's cooking.
Now, you're not his cousin. Just to go back to that.
I'm way not his cousin.
How did you two meet originally?
Oh, there's a story there.
Well, we met in school, like he said.
Yeah.
And I'm going to give you another interesting fact.
Go ahead.
Okay. So Buzzy, I call him Buzzy, Jeff. He loves Italian food. I mean, I don't know how many times when we go out, we go to Italian restaurants with our wives and different things. So I said to Buzzy one time, and even pizza, okay, which there was one pizza, he would fast all day until night.
That's true.
And so I would say, Buzzy, you definitely have to have Italian in you. Yeah, who knows? Because what is he? So he takes his ancestry test or whatever. He finds out he's 8%.
Oh, really?
Well, yes. I might not look it, but somewhere in there.
He's 8% Italian. So, yes, we were friends since first grade. I was his best man. He was in my wedding. We could tell you another funny story about when he got married and the ring, another time. But the thing is that we've been friends a long, long time. We have a big history together. We've traveled different places together. So yes, that's how long.
I'd like to add one thing. I know that we're getting on in our conversation here. Now, because Joe and I are friends, my main acquaintance was with the Ciocci side. And I thought Joe's dad was a wonderful man. And I loved to go over to visit Joe when he was there. In the barn would be braids of garlic a foot long that he would grow and then sell to local restaurants.
Yes.
We were talking one day, he said, "You like potatoes?" And I said, "Well, sure, I like potatoes." And he goes out and there's a row dug in the garden and it's filled with hay. He said, "Put your hands down in there." And I did. And there was potatoes growing in the hay. You could just pick up potatoes and they were fresh and wonderful. I love to see his gardens. Later came a magazine called Organic Gardening, and Mr. Ciocci's shed and his garden area looked like that years before anybody ever knew anything like that.
Well, thank you. And that's exactly correct. Right. And in particular, the one with the potatoes. And he would grow garlic and he would sell it locally, as well as he did. There was something, cantaloupes, watermelons, honeydews, they were things that you really had a hard time growing in this area. But he would also grow bumper crops of those, and we would, put them out there. Well, he was a natural gardener. He worked on the Fuller estate. He worked on the Sweeney's estate. He retired from the Linder estate, where he basically was in life a gardener. He did other jobs at times, but he was a gardener, and that's what he was noted for. And he could grow anything, just literally like my mother, and not only produce, also flowers. We always had the house. We had a small house that I grew up in, which, by the way, was built on part of the old foundation of where the old DeRiggi house had burned down. So when my father came back from the war, he built there. And that's how I came to own the land ultimately through my father and mother. But
so your dad knew how to grow the stuff.
Oh, he
and
knew.
Your mom knew how to cook it.
Absolutely.
And you knew how to eat it.
That's correct. Absolutely.
Joe, I want to thank you for sharing your experiences, perceptions, memories, and observations on the lives, culture, and societal contributions of early Italian-American immigrants in Dalton. and throughout the region. And by the way, we'll be celebrating the contributions and cultures of other early immigrant groups in Dalton in future podcasts. Thanks to you, our listeners, for your interest and for sharing your time with Jeff Cornell and me, Bill Guest, on Stories from the Hollow.
Thank you, Bill.
It was great to have you, Joe. Joe, do you have any last statements you'd like to make? Anything you'd like to leave on the record as we close out?
Well, probably there's so much more that we could talk about, but I think we hit on some of the important things of the early life of the DeRiggi family in this area. And I really, truly appreciate the opportunity to have done this. It's really been a very nice experience. So I thank you both.
Thank you, Joe.
I think that this is all good because I like to think as I near 80 that things like this will be available for future generations, because I know the children and grandchildren are not interested in finding out about this stuff until it's too late.
Right.
I have 1,000 questions I'd like to ask my father, and it's
That's
impossible for me to do now.
Exactly.
And so I would appreciate the fact that Greg and the Keystone radio station has made these recordings available. And with modern technology, they'll be searchable at some point, and people will be able to find out information about it. Thank you, Joe.